All right, let's dive into this fascinating world of stress and its impact on your brain. You sent over a really interesting mix of research articles, podcast interviews, even a self-help book, all about stress and this thing called neuroplasticity.
Yeah, it's quite a bit to unpack.
It is. But before we get into that, I just have to say some of the things we're going to uncover today are mind-blowing. Like, did you know stress is literally contagious?
It really is.
And get this, just by visualizing exercise, you can actually build muscle.
Fascinating stuff.
It is. And then we'll also get into how sleep is like a nightly power wash for your brain, just flushing out toxins while you dream. I'm already hooked, so to speak.
Well, I'm excited to dive in. I think a good place to start is by understanding how your body actually reacts to stress.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
So it all starts with something called the HPA axis.
The HPA axis.
Yeah, think of it like it's like a chain reaction in your body. It gets triggered when you face any sort of threat. Could be physical, could be emotional. And this HPA axis then sets off the release of hormones like cortisol.
Oh, cortisol, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's often called the stress hormone.
Right, right.
And this whole system was actually, really crucial for our ancestors' survival. Imagine, like back in the day, facing a saber-toothed tiger. Yeah. That surge of cortisol, the adrenaline, it would give them the energy to either fight or flee. That fight-or-flight response we hear about.
So stress was actually a good thing back then.
Yeah, in those situations.
Yeah.
It was designed to be, temporary, a short burst of stress. Like if you swerve your car to avoid an accident, that's beneficial.
Right.
But here's the catch. In our modern world, we're constantly bombarded with these stressors.
Oh, tell me about it.
Big and small. We're talking deadlines, traffic jams, overflowing inboxes, you name it.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah, we're just constantly on edge in a way.
Yeah. So is that where the that micro-stress doses concept comes in? I think I saw that somewhere in the materials you sent.
Yeah, that's Dr. Rangan Chatterjee.
Yeah.
In his book, The Stress Solution.
Right.
He calls these everyday stressors micro-stress doses.
MSDs.
MSDs, okay?
Yeah.
He uses this brilliant analogy. The cupboard of no return.
Cupboard of no return.
Yeah, imagine you're stuffing all these little stresses, unfinished tasks, worries, all into a cupboard.
Yeah.
Eventually it overflows, right?
Right, of course.
That's chronic stress, that constant feeling of being overloaded.
Okay, yeah, that analogy really resonates. I feel like my stress cupboard is about to explode someday.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
So what can we actually do to manage those MSDs and keep that cupboard from overflowing?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
But Dr. Chatterjee, he offers some practical strategies.
Okay.
One key idea is to become aware of your MSDs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really notice them when they happen.
Rare.
And then find ways to empty that cupboard.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, it could be anything from a quick meditation break to a brisk walk in nature, or even just jotting down your thoughts in a journal.
Oh, journaling, yeah.
It's about finding what works for you to release that pent-up stress.
I'm a big believer in the power of journaling to clear my head.
Yeah, it can be really helpful.
So, but what happens when we let those MSDs pile up and we kind of just live in this constant state of stress?
Well, then those chronically high levels of cortisol, they start to affect your body in some pretty significant ways.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, did you know there's a link between stress and belly fat?
Seriously?
Turns out cortisol can actually encourage your body to store fat, particularly around your abdomen.
Hold on, so stress can literally make you gain weight?
It can. It's a common response.
Well, that explains a lot. I've definitely noticed that I tend to crave comfort food when I'm stressed out.
Yeah, that's another way our bodies respond to stress.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, man.
Chronic stress and high cortisol are linked to all sorts of health issues.
Oh, great. Like what?
Everything from inflammation to weakened immunity to even an increased risk of heart problems.
Okay, well, that's motivating me to get a handle on my stress levels.
Okay. Good. It's important to take it seriously.
Definitely. But there's this other fascinating thing in the research that you sent.
Okay, what's that?
This idea that stress can be contagious. Is that really true?
It is. We humans are social creatures, and we subconsciously pick up on each other's emotions.
Okay.
And this is called emotional contagion. And believe it or not, cortisol can actually be transmitted through sweat.
Wait, through sweat. So if I'm around someone who's super stressed, I can actually absorb their stress, just like that.
In a way, yes. From an evolutionary perspective, it actually makes sense.
How so?
Well, imagine our ancestors encountering a predator, right? The stressed individual's cortisol, it would trigger a similar response in others, increasing their chances of survival as a group.
Oh, wow. So it's like a built-in alarm system. We're hardwired to pick up on each other's stress signals.
Exactly.
That makes you wonder about the implications for like leadership, right?
It does. If you think about a leader's stress levels, they can significantly impact their entire team.
That's a powerful thought.
It's definitely something to consider.
Okay, so we talked about the downside of stress, but the research you sent also highlights our brain's amazing ability to change and adapt. That whole concept of neuroplasticity.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
What exactly is neuroplasticity and how does it work?
It's essentially the brain's ability to rewire and reorganize itself
Throughout life.
throughout life. For a long time, scientists thought that our brains were fixed after a certain age.
Oh, really?
But now we know that's not true at all.
So our brains are like constantly evolving.
Precisely. And one way this happens is through what we call synaptic plasticity.
Synaptic plasticity.
It's the strengthening or weakening of connections between neurons.
Got it.
The more you use a particular neural pathway, the stronger that pathway becomes. By repeating a thought or an action or even an experience.
So the more we practice something, the more ingrained it becomes in our brains.
Exactly. And that goes for both, positive and negative patterns.
Oh, wow.
But the good news is with conscious effort, we can actually rewire those pathways
To change bad habits.
to change unwanted behaviors, to create healthier habits, all sorts of things.
That's amazing. That's incredibly empowering.
It is.
But synaptic plasticity is only one part of the story, right? You mentioned something about neurogenesis as well.
Right. Neurogenesis is the creation of brand new neurons, primarily in a region of the brain called the hippocampus,
Hippocampus.
which is involved in learning and memory.
So we can actually grow new brain cells.
We can.
I always thought we were just born with like a certain number and that was it.
It's a fairly recent discovery.
Yeah.
And guess what promotes neurogenesis?
What's that?
Exercise, learning new things, and, you guessed it, reducing stress.
So managing stress can help us grow new brain cells.
Exactly.
Okay, I am officially sold on stress management. This is all starting to connect in a fascinating way, the stress, the sleep, this neuroplasticity. But how can we harness the power of neuroplasticity to actually change our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors?
Well, there's a neuroscientist and author, Dr. Tara Swart.
Okay.
She outlines a really powerful 3-step approach to changing unwanted patterns and behaviors
Okay.
using neuroplasticity.
I'm all ears.
It starts with raised awareness.
So we need to become aware of the patterns we want to change.
Exactly. Let's say you have a friend and she keeps dating people who are already in relationships.
Yeah, we've all been there. Or known
Okay.
someone who has.
Right. So that's the pattern. The underlying belief might be, I'm not worthy of love unless someone else already wants me.
That makes sense. So step one is really shining a light on those subconscious beliefs that are driving our actions.
Precisely. Once you've identified the pattern and the belief, the next step is focused attention.
Focus attention, okay.
This involves really analyzing the pain and consequences of that pattern. Journaling can be a helpful tool for this step.
So it's like getting really honest with yourself
Mm-hmm.
about the negative impact of those patterns.
Exactly. And that leads to the third step, deliberate practice.
Okay, deliberate practice. What does that mean?
This is where you consciously choose a different thought or action, even if it feels awkward at first. Repetition is key. The more you practice this new behavior, the stronger those new neural pathways become.
So it's about intentionally building new habits, even if they feel, uncomfortable at first.
Exactly.
Well, this makes me think about my struggle with disorganization. I always blame it on, growing up in a kind of chaotic household.
I see.
But now I realize maybe that's just an excuse.
You're not alone. A lot of us carry habits and beliefs from childhood that don't serve us anymore.
Right.
But the good news is you have the power to change those ingrained patterns.
It takes effort, though.
It does, but it's possible.
Okay, that's really encouraging. So we've covered stress, we've covered neuroplasticity. Now I'm dying to talk about the magic of sleep.
Okay.
I've recently become a total sleep convert, and I can't believe how much it impacts my mood, my energy, even my productivity.
I think a lot of people underestimate the power of sleep.
I definitely did, but what's so special about sleep? Why is it so important?
Sleep is way more than just resting our bodies.
Okay.
It's essential for brain health. It plays a crucial role in cleaning and detoxifying our brains.
Cleaning and detoxifying our brain.
Yeah.
How?
There's this fascinating system called the glymphatic system.
Okay.
It's like your brain's own waste disposal system, flushing out toxins.
So while we sleep, our brains are literally cleaning house.
They are, including a protein called beta amyloid
Okay.
that's been linked to Alzheimer's disease.
Wow.
And there's even a sleep position that's thought to be optimal for this glymphatic drainage.
Really?
Any guesses?
I'm going to go with sleeping on your side.
You got it. Sleeping on your side seems to allow for the most efficient flow of cerebrospinal fluid, which helps flush out those toxins.
This is blowing my mind. Just something as simple as our sleep position can impact brain health.
It can.
It really makes you think about how we can make small changes to improve our sleep. This has been an incredible deep dive already.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
We have.
I'm so eager to learn more about how we can optimize our sleep, manage stress, and harness this power of neuroplasticity to create positive change. We'll be back in the next part of our deep dive to uncover even more fascinating insights.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
You know, one of the most intriguing things that Dr. Chatterjee talks about in his book is that we're not designed to be on all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like our bodies have these natural rhythms.
Okay.
And when we ignore them, it can lead to all sorts of problems.
Right. He talks about respecting our circadian rhythms, that internal clock that regulates our sleep-wake cycles. He even challenges this idea that we're either like morning larks or night owls, suggesting we might have more control over our sleep patterns than we realize.
There's definitely evidence to support that. He tells this story about a friend who was convinced he was a night owl, always staying up late, feeling sluggish in the afternoons.
Yeah.
And Dr. Chatterjee encouraged him to shift his routine, waking up earlier, getting more exposure to natural light in the mornings.
And what happened?
His afternoon slumps vanished. He became more productive.
Wow. So it really is about resetting our internal clocks.
It highlights how adaptable our bodies can be if we just give them the right cues.
That's pretty amazing. Although I do struggle with that first thing in the morning. Can't resist scrolling through my phone, even though I know that blast of blue light probably isn't helping my sleep hormones.
Yeah. I think we all struggle with that to some degree. It's like we're wired to seek out that stimulation. But Dr. Chatterjee really emphasizes the importance of a consistent sleep routine. Going to bed and waking up around the same time each day.
Even on weekends.
Even on weekends. And he strongly advises against having, devices in the bedroom.
Yeah, that makes sense. He also talks about dimming the lights a couple of hours before bed to help signal to our bodies that it's time to wind down.
Right. It's all about creating that sleep-conducive environment.
Yeah. And no late-night eating. I'm definitely guilty of that one.
He's not a fan of late-night eating. Disrupts our sleep. Can even contribute to weight gain.
Right.
Another thing he points out is that many of us are consuming liquid stress without even realizing it.
Liquid stress? You mean like sugary drinks and stuff?
Well, those too, but he's primarily talking about alcohol and caffeine.
Oh.
Alcohol might make us feel sleepy at first, but it actually disrupts our sleep cycles. Prevents that deep restorative sleep.
So even if we have our last cup of coffee hours before bed,
it can still be lingering in our systems, making it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. He even suggests, cutting out caffeine entirely for a couple of weeks.
Wow. Just to see if it makes a difference.
Yeah. And speaking of things that can affect our sleep, let's talk about exercise.
Okay, so exercise is good for us, obviously. But how does it relate to, stress and sleep?
Well, Dr. Chatterjee, he's a huge proponent of exercise. But he also emphasizes the importance of listening to our bodies and adjusting our workouts based on our stress levels.
Okay, how do we do that?
He recommends using something called heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, I've heard of that. I don't really understand it, though.
It's basically a measure of the variation in time between your heartbeats. A high HRV suggests that you're in a more relaxed state, so you can handle a more intense workout.
Okay.
But a low HRV, on the other hand, indicates that your body might be under stress and needs more rest and recovery.
So it's like a personalized stress meter.
You could say that.
I like that. It takes the guesswork out of it. You know how hard to push yourself.
Exactly. He even shares an example of this patient who was consistently stressed out by these Wednesday afternoon team meetings.
Meetings.
I know, right? But this stress was leading him to drink more alcohol in the evenings, which then disrupted his sleep.
Oh, wow. It's amazing how these things can, snowball.
It created this cascade of negative effects that lasted throughout the week.
Yeah. It is empowering to know that we can break those cycles. By becoming more aware of our stress levels.
We can.
Okay, so we've talked about sleep, exercise, managing those micro stress doses. What are some other strategies for creating a less stressful life?
Well, Dr. Chatterjee is a big advocate for spending time in nature.
Oh, nature. Yeah.
He argues that even short periods outdoors can have a remarkable impact on our stress levels, our mood, our overall health.
I'm a firm believer in that. I always feel more relaxed, more clear-headed after just a walk in the park.
There's actually a name for this. It's called forest bathing.
Forest bathing.
Yeah, it's a Japanese practice, immersing yourself in the sights, the sounds, the smells of nature. Studies have shown it can lower blood pressure, reduce stress hormones, boost immune function.
I love that term. It really captures the feeling of being, like, enveloped by nature. And it's not just about the visual beauty of nature, it's about the sensory experience.
You're right. The sounds of birdsong, the feel of the wind on your skin, the smell of fresh air, it's all very calming.
It really is. And there's something about being in nature that just makes me feel more present, less distracted. It's like my mind can finally slow down and breathe.
It makes sense. Our brains are bombarded with stimulation all day long,
Right.
especially from our devices.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Chatterjee talks about Facebook brain, right?
Yes, where our brains become so accustomed to the constant pings, the notifications of social media, that they start to perceive threat even when there is none.
I know that feeling of being, like, constantly on, connected. It's exhausting.
It is.
So what does he recommend to combat Facebook brain? Does he say we should just, like, get rid of all our devices?
He's a big proponent of taking regular digital holidays.
Okay, so, like, completely unplugging.
For a period of time, yeah.
I love that idea, but it's so hard to do. In today's world, unplugging completely can feel almost impossible.
He acknowledges that. But there are smaller steps we can take, like deleting social media apps from our phone, setting time limits for usage, having certain times of the day as like device-free zones.
I like that. It's about finding that balance, being more mindful.
Exactly.
Although sometimes it feels like our devices have this almost addictive quality to them, like it's hard to resist.
He does say that. And social media platforms, they're designed to keep us hooked.
It's like they're hijacking our attention.
In a way, they are.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of nature, the importance of unplugging, finding a healthier relationship with technology. What else?
Well, he also emphasizes the importance of something we do constantly, without even thinking about it. Breathing.
Breathing. How can breathing be a stress management strategy?
Well, when we're stressed, we tend to take these shallow, rapid breaths, which actually perpetuates that fight or flight response.
Oh, interesting.
But when we consciously slow down our breathing, taking deep diaphragmatic breaths, we signal to our bodies that we're safe and we can relax.
So just by changing the way we breathe, we can calm our nervous system.
We can. It's a powerful tool that's always available to us. He even offers what he calls a breathing menu.
A breathing menu.
Yeah, with different techniques we can try, from simple 1-minute exercises to, more advanced practices.
Oh, wow. I'm definitely going to have to check out that breathing menu. Okay, so is there anything else we haven't touched on?
Well, there's one more fascinating area he explores, the connection between our gut health and our mental well-being.
Okay.
He calls it the gut-brain axis.
The gut-brain axis. I've heard that term. Not sure I totally understand what it means, though.
It's essentially a two-way communication highway between our gut and our brain.
Wait, our gut can send signals to our brain, and vice versa.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is that the trillions of bacteria living in our gut microbiome, play a crucial role in this communication.
So those tiny organisms in our gut can actually impact our mental health.
They can. When our gut microbiome is out of balance, it can contribute to, all sorts of issues, including anxiety, depression, even brain fog.
That is incredible. It really highlights how interconnected everything is in our bodies. So what can we do to cultivate a healthy gut microbiome?
Dr. Chatterjee emphasizes a diverse whole foods diet.
Okay, so like lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And he's a big advocate for fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir. They're packed with beneficial bacteria.
I've heard those are good for gut health, but I haven't really incorporated them into my diet. Maybe it's time to start. What about like those probiotic supplements I see everywhere?
He does talk about those. Probiotics can be helpful for introducing beneficial bacteria into our gut. But he does caution that, more research is needed to determine which strains are most effective for specific conditions.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about diet. Are there other lifestyle factors that affect our gut health?
He talks about the negative impact of stress on our gut bacteria.
So stress is bad for our brains and our guts.
Pretty much.
Well, no wonder I get stomach aches when I'm feeling anxious.
It's all connected. And on the flip side, things like exercise and spending time in nature can actually benefit our gut microbiome.
This is all so fascinating. We've talked about sleep, nutrition, exercise, nature, mindfulness, even breathing. But there's one more kind of crucial aspect of well-being that we haven't discussed. Connection.
You're right. Connection is essential.
Yeah.
Dr. Chatterjee really emphasizes that it's not just about digital connection through social media.
Okay.
It's about real human connection.
So like face-to-face interaction, spending time with loved ones, building those meaningful relationships.
Exactly. He highlights the power of touch, how even simple acts of affection, like hugs and cuddles, can reduce stress, lower blood pressure, increase feelings of well-being.
Yeah, I love hugs. But in our busy, tech-driven world, it's easy to let those real-life connections slip.
It is.
So what does he suggest for like cultivating deeper connections?
Well, he encourages us to become regulars,
Regular.
to find places where we feel, comfortable and supported, whether it's a local cafe or a yoga studio or a volunteer organization.
It's about finding your tribe.
Right.
Creating a sense of belonging.
Exactly. And he reminds us that true connection takes time.
Mm.
It takes effort. It's about building those face-to-face relationships where we can truly be ourselves, feel seen and heard.
I love that. This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've explored so many different facets of well-being, and it's amazing how it all connects.
It really is.
I'm already feeling inspired to make some, positive changes in my own life. But before we wrap things up, there's one more kind of intriguing thing in the research I want to touch on. This idea that trauma can be passed down through generations. That sounds kind of intense. You're saying if my great-grandmother experienced some traumatic event, it could still be affecting me today. How does that even work?
It's a relatively new field of research called epigenetics.
Epigenetics, okay.
Essentially, studies suggest that trauma can actually change how our genes express themselves.
Wait, so our genes can change based on our experiences?
Not the DNA sequence itself, but how those genes are expressed, like whether they're turned on or off, can be modified by our experiences. And that includes trauma.
So think of it like a switch that gets flipped.
Yeah, exactly. And those changes can be passed down through generations.
I never knew that. But if trauma can be passed down, can positive experiences also have an impact on our genes?
That's a great question, and researchers are still exploring that. But it definitely raises some fascinating possibilities about how we can shape the well-being of future generations.
It makes you think about the legacy we're creating. Not just for ourselves, but for our kids and grandkids.
It does. And it's not just about those major traumatic events either.
Right.
Dr. Chatterjee talks about how even those everyday micro-stress doses can contribute to this chronic stress state that can potentially be passed down.
So we're inadvertently passing down a legacy of stress.
It's a sobering thought, but the good news is that we can break those cycles.
Okay, good.
By becoming more aware of our own stress, developing healthy coping mechanisms, creating a more supportive environment, we can shift those patterns.
And create a more positive legacy.
Exactly.
That's really empowering. It makes you realize we have more control than we think.
We do. And speaking of patterns, Dr. Swart, she also talks about recognizing and challenging our own negative thought patterns, especially those that are rooted in childhood experiences.
Oh, okay.
She gives an example of a friend who keeps getting involved with people who are already in relationships.
Yeah.
It's clearly causing her pain,
Yeah.
but she just can't seem to break the cycle.
Yeah, I think we all know someone who falls into those same patterns. Why do we do that?
Often it boils down to unconscious beliefs that we formed in childhood
Okay.
that are driving our behavior,
Yeah.
even when those behaviors aren't serving us.
So how do we break free from those patterns? It sounds incredibly challenging.
It is, but Dr. Swart, she suggests a 3-step process.
Okay.
First, becoming aware of the pattern.
Okay.
Second, focusing on the pain and the consequences of that pattern.
Right.
And third, engaging in deliberate practice
Okay.
to change those thoughts and actions.
So it's about creating new neural pathways.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of effort to override those deeply ingrained patterns.
It does, but the brain is amazingly adaptable.
That's true.
And with consistent effort, we can literally rewire ourselves for greater well-being.
One of the most mind-blowing things I learned from this whole deep dive is just how powerful our thoughts are.
Yeah.
The fact that simply visualizing exercise can build muscle is incredible.
It speaks to the power of the mind-body connection. And Dr. Swart also talks about the power of affirmations.
Affirmation.
Yeah, like positive statements that we repeat to ourselves
Yeah.
as a way to reprogram our subconscious minds.
But she cautions against using affirmations that feel fake or out of reach, right?
Right. It's about identifying those limiting beliefs that are holding us back
Okay.
and then choosing affirmations that directly challenge those beliefs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's not enough to just, repeat these positive statements, right? We need to actually take action.
Action is essential. We need to align our actions with our affirmations to create real change.
So it's about creating the synergy between our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions. This deep dive has been quite a journey. We've explored so much. From stress to sleep, neuroplasticity, gut health, the importance of connection.
It's all connected.
If there's one key takeaway, it's that we are not passive bystanders in our own lives. We have so much power to shape our own well-being.
Couldn't agree more.
It's inspiring to think about all the possibilities, and it really comes down to, awareness, making conscious choices, and taking action.
Well said.
By understanding how our minds and bodies work, we can make choices that truly support our well-being. And by putting these insights into practice, we can create a more resilient, joyful, and fulfilling life. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling ready to take on the world. This research has opened up so many new avenues for me, and I'm excited to keep learning and growing and applying these principles to my own life. I encourage you, dear listener, to do the same. Take some time to reflect on what resonated with you today and start experimenting. Remember, your brain is constantly changing, and you have the power to shape it in ways that support your health and your happiness. And before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final kind of thought-provoking question inspired by everything we've discussed. If our brains are constantly being shaped by our experiences, what kind of brain are you creating today? That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.